Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Something I was chatting to someone about the other day was this business of how do we know when we should be thinking theoretically, when we should be tuning into theory about things, and when it's time to tune into our felt experience. So you may think, well, Catherine, surely you will always favor tuning into experience and that theory is probably less important. Well, yes, actually, on balance, if I had to choose only the one, I would choose experience because that is ultimately the most important aspect of being alive, what we're actually experiencing. If I could have to choose only one, but actually, I don't have to choose only one, and nor do you, nobody does. We have within us the capacity for thinking conceptually, abstract thought, thinking in straight lines, thinking theoretically, examining things in that way with our cognitive function, our mental function. And we also have the capacity to tune into our felt experience in the moment, and also to remember felt experience from the past or to imagine felt experience for the future. So how do we know which, why is it a problem not being in the right one at the right time? So I had an experience in a relationship I was in where the person I was involved with, and you may say this was madness that I was involved with this person because it was an aspect where we really didn't fit with each other. This person was highly cerebral. They tended to live in theory a lot of the time and to live in mental process a lot of the time, which before I got into a relationship with this person, I found really fascinating and interesting. And we had these extraordinary, deep intellectual conversations, and it was wonderful, really wonderful. And this person is incredibly talented in that regard. But unfortunately, once we were in the relationship, sometimes he would try to apply the theoretical to the relationship and say, well, if people love each other, they should do this or shouldn't do that. Or you shouldn't be doing that, or you should be doing this, because that's not what people do in relationships. So you can see why that wouldn't work with most people, because for most people, what they want in a relationship is a conversation or a relationship which is based on what we're actually experiencing together. You know, where the person says, I would like this, I'd like us to do this. I think it would be a good idea. How do you feel about that? Does that feel right to you? Do you like it? Or equally, if I said, for example, I don't like turmeric, and then the response would be, well, it's really good for you, though. You know, we're again attempting to override the felt experience with theory. So as you can imagine, this was a short-lived relationship, but it was a profound learning for me, because it really tuned me into the fact that I need to know when I need to be connecting into and coming from felt experience, and when it's appropriate and useful to tune into theory. So, for example, some people joke that men will not read a manual. Now, I don't think that's true, that no men will read manuals, but you know, a lot of us don't want to read the manual. We just want to actually feel our way through it to get something to work. And sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes we need to look at the manual, because that's going to actually take advantage of work someone else has already done to design something, describe how to use it, describe what to do next, and what to do if there's a problem. And in that case, theory is the way to go. And it's but then in a relationship, for example, theory is probably not the way to go, because you're in an emotional connection with somebody. Another example of this was the other day, I was talking to someone about one of my offerings, and this woman said, so what's your background that allows you to do this, essentially? And when she said this to me, I was really struck by the fact that, A, I never get asked that question. I haven't been asked that question for years. And B, I used to be asked that question all the time when I was an executive coach working for corporates. And I reflected on that afterwards, and I thought, do you know what? what's happening now is that most of the people I'm working with tend to trust their gut when they decide whether or not to work with somebody. They tend to not be looking at what's your training, what are your credentials, what are your qualifications. Some of them might be interested, in which case they might have a quick look at my bio somewhere or something, but most of them, that's not really their priority. Whereas when I was working in the corporate world, I was working with, most of the people I was working with had much more of a theory-based emphasis. For example, when I was working with the big banks, they had to have this extraordinary cognitive facility for dealing with money and decisions and processes and so many complicated systems and aspects of systems that for them, it was more natural when considering working with someone to look at what's the evidence that this person is good? What's the evidence they can be trusted, rather than go to felt experience and gut feeling. Now, I mean, we could argue that actually when they decided to go ahead working with me, it was really because of gut feeling and felt experience, and how they actually felt when they were with me. And I think that's probably largely true. But along the way to that, before they allowed themselves to trust that, many of them needed to ask those other questions. And so I just was very comfortable with, I got comfortable with answering those questions. To be fair, initially I wasn't comfortable because I thought, well, your gut feeling is going to tell you what works for you. So why do we need to waste time doing this? But I understood I needed to get past that and give people what they needed, give them the information. So I think in our lives, we're constantly moving through situations where either we're being encouraged or asked or invited to be more theoretical or tune into the theory around things or the abstract thinking around things, and where we're being invited or asked to tune more into the felt experience. And for each of us, we need to find ways of discerning which is more appropriate in the moment. Sometimes we need both, actually. Sometimes we need both. Like, for example, let's say you're thinking of buying a property, a house. Yeah, you want to walk in and you want to kind of get a feeling of, does this feel like me? Do I feel drawn to it? Does something in me lift when I walk into this place? But equally, it's probably sensible to look at some of the more physical and abstract things about it, like, for example, is it on a floodplain? Is it in an area where there's a quarry right next door that causes it to shake and things are going to fall off the wall? Or are there people living next door who are going to be a problem? Or can I actually afford it? These are more abstract, these are more thought-based considerations, which are also important, which, if ignored, could then negatively impact our felt experience in the moment. So it feels much better to be living in a property where we know either we have no mortgage, or if we do, it's extremely manageable. We know the property has a good value. The value is going to increase, so that if we need to move, we can do that easily. All sorts of other factors. If those practical factors are taken care of, that then makes a better space for us to actually, in the moment, drop into a beautiful experience of pleasure and, the quiet enjoyment of living there. So if we ignore the theoretical and the practical aspects, there could be a cost to that. But if we ignore the felt aspect of it, so if we say, okay, it makes sense in every way for me to buy this property and move in here, but if our heart doesn't want to move in, if it doesn't feel like our right place, and if that can't be transformed once we're there, then there's a cost to that for us. So I'm really not offering any answers on this one. I'm just raising the point that knowing when to tune into the felt experience and when to choose into the theoretical or the mental aspects of something that's happening, or a decision or a plan or whatever it may be, is really important. And it also very much affects our relationships. And it also really makes a difference to where we're placing our energy and what we're choosing to do in our lives. So I'll leave that with you to reflect on, and I will wish you a beautiful week and see you next time. In the meantime, Do check it into truthandtranscendence.com for my other episodes. And please tune into beingspace.world or freedomofspirit.world for my other work. Have a great week. Bye for now.